I would say I was not the average player. With all of the high quality aim training resources available to the public, it's much easier for the average player to be informed. I would say I was not the average player in the sense that I did not feel like I understood those resources, let alone improve significantly from them. Thankfully, being an information brick did not stop me from pushing scores and ranks that I never thought to be possible. Working around my shortcomings helped me realize that being a slow learner was not necessarily this permanent state, and that's probably required for further development. In this video, I want to talk about how I had mild success following a suboptimal improvement path in contrast to the ideal one that people romanticize. The issue was most apparent when the Voltaic Season 5 benchmarks were slated to be released soon. I was preparing in order to get a new, prestigious rank like many others in the community. This time around, people were hungry to share information compared to when I first started. Like most proactive players, I decided to watch most up to date videos and lurked around. Unfortunately, there was one big problem. I didn't feel like I could translate what I was watching and reading into improved performance. It just felt like I could listen but not understand, and I opted to just try to grind stuff I was uncomfortable with. I would constantly hope that I could make it fit and figure out what exactly these videos were saying through brute force, under the hope that I would develop hands on experience. I could never make it work, and I decided to just drop the idea that I would ever understand what these videos would say. How was I going to find a path forward to improve if I can't follow what was supposedly correct? I decided to look back at prior experiences and hope that some different mental models would be useful for me. I was already going to be wrong, so why not just pull from whatever I felt like? Instead of trying to understand any of these large ideas that the videos presented, I would try to ask the simplest questions possible. Stuff like what is tension? Where does the bot decelerate? Does fingertip versus wrist matter? And all of the other common questions that might even be too simple for beginners. I didn't even have either a value system or an order system to what I chose to develop because I just outright felt like the mental effort wasn't going to lead to anything now. The idea of looking for a type of instant gratification like development seems kind of sacrilegious for what's meant to be a long term journey of improvement. Counterintuitively, this approach led to one of my fastest growth spurts of my entire journey. I initially explained this approach as quote unquote failing fast, where I would be able to quickly iterate on ideas and misunderstandings. However, there were even more benefits that I did not recognize until after my initial realization. Choosing simple questions ended up being quite convenient because they gave me much more confidence in my answers. Better, more comprehensive questions generally require complicated answers, and verification usually led to a lot of uncertainty for me. No, I really couldn't tell whether I was misreading the deceleration, or if my direction changed improper, or if it was actually a mouse control error for every single strafe when I was cranking out unranked scores in raw control. Keeping it simple meant that I could quickly verify if I was following what I set out to practice in the first place. I could genuinely figure out if I set out what I planned to do, and this simplicity gave me a structure. The structure developed in the focus and much more deliberate goals from practicing. Eventually, I would just collect experience and knowledge that would eventually let me figure out what these overarching descriptions of good aim were. I had a much stronger idea of how people described higher level concepts such as tension management and fluidity because I had background knowledge which then required less mental gymnastics in my head to understand. I could then focus on trying to figure out practical solutions when I was in a scenario. As I got better, I realized I would need higher quality mental models, so I started to reflect on how I learned during my journey. I was worried that I would not be able to keep up with the new information I would need due to my past failures. I would then take the natural next step and reflect on why I struggled so much early on. As good as the highest quality aim training videos are, they are still videos for the general public. Through no fault of these creators, the nature of the medium forces advice to be more general and more theoretical because it has to appeal to a wide audience. In addition, this information is curated in a way that might not necessarily be in my best interest. As a result, I've had to accept that researching more about aim training will be confusing at times. Fortunately, aim trainers will always be there, the ideas will always be there, and there's no harm in shelving stuff off and seeing if revisiting old resources helps. Looking back at this part of my journey, I'm more confident in being able to separate what my knowledge base is from what I can currently implement and not let the invisible expectation of a video let me feel worse about myself. It is okay that I'm unable to bridge these two sets of knowledge as cleanly as a high level player with the assistance of editing magic. As a result, I don't really see the value in dropping my approach and focusing on small parts at a time to develop into larger models. If anything, I feel like leaning more into that was the most useful for improving as a whole for me. Overall, I feel like struggling with learning early on was this obstacle that I never really overcame without accepting parts of my own style. Focusing on being more deliberate on how I learn allowed me to fix my approach to previous obstacles and even deal with greater ones that I didn't expect to conquer. Thanks for listening to my story about how I managed to get around being a very unproductive student. I feel like it was important to show how learning wasn't nice and clean for me, unlike how educational videos can sometimes imply. The video's actually over now, I promise.